Hey everyone, welcome to Massachusetts Sports Central. This is our NFL Power Rankings after Week 7 of the season. Just to remind everyone what these rankings are. This list represents how likely we think that each team will win Super Bowl 52. It is not an ordered list of the best teams necessarily. It also isn't a random list based on who beat who last week. So basically, this list is less reactionary than many of these types of power rankings. With a lot less upsets and unexpected outcomes this week, things are a little more stable. 7 teams are in the same place as last week, and 21 moving 3 spots or less. Once again, when looking beyond the top, 5, 6, 7 teams and the bottom half dozen or so teams, it is pretty hard to rank them. And the middle 20-ish teams or so really have a margin of error of at least about 5 spots. All right, on to the rankings. Number 32, the Cleveland Browns, staying put at dead last. Give them a little bit of credit for actually hanging with Tennessee and taking them to overtime, but I think that says more about how Tennessee is underachieving right now than the Browns have turned any kind of corner. They are winless, and they have been bad for the most part in being winless. All right, number 31, also staying put, the San Francisco 49ers, the other winless team. They got destroyed this week by Dallas, but otherwise they've actually been competitive in most of their games. So at this point, at least, as long as they're both winless, they are probably staying ahead of the Browns. All right, moving on. Number 30, also staying put, the New York Giants. The only one-win team that we currently have is so they're only ahead of the 2 winless teams. They were beaten pretty badly again. They only have 1 win. They pretty much have 0 shot at the playoffs at this point. So, like I said, since this is about how your chances of winning the Super Bowl, they have no chance. All right, number 29, moving down 5 slots, the Indianapolis Colts. I might actually have them a little too low just based on my own criteria of being able to win the Super Bowl, just because their division is pretty I don't want to say weak per se, but is certainly no team is really standing out, and they're not that far out of contention, but they're far enough out, and they are in last place, and they are pretty terrible, and they only have 2 wins, and the only 2 teams they've beaten are the 2 teams with no wins. So don't think too much of them. All right, number 28, moving down 7 slots, the Arizona Cardinals. So the Cardinals have losing all their best players. So, everybody knows David Johnson went out and was going to miss a sizable portion of the season. Now Carson Palmer is injured, and he's likely to miss at least most, if not all, the rest of the season. Kind of assume he won't come back this season unless somehow they go on an amazing run and are actually in playoff contention in the last 2 or 3 weeks of the season. But, that seems pretty unlikely. They got absolutely destroyed this week, and losing their starting quarterback is a recipe for falling way down on the list. And again, similar to the Colts, they aren't even in last place like the Colts, since they're in the same division as the god-awful 49ers, but they are behind 2 pretty good teams in the Rams and the Seahawks, so I don't really see them getting over any hump. All right, number 27, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is actually where I had them last week as well. Another bad team, another bad loss. So they were down big to the Bills, which didn't look good. Then they roared back, similar to last week, taking a late lead, and then blowing that lead and losing the game. So they had the bad thing of basically getting the score run up on them early, and then also had the bad thing of them not being able to finish a game that they had a late lead in. So no matter how you want to slice it, the Bucs have been pretty bad, and they continue to be bad, and they don't look very good. And now they're in last place and only have 2 wins, and are in any chance of the playoffs are getting very unlikely. All right, number 26, the Cincinnati Bengals, falling 3 slots. Again, they are not a last place team because they happen to be in the same division as the Browns, but otherwise they're as bad as pretty much any team that has actually won a game this year. They lost to the Steelers this week, and that put them that much farther behind them in the division and overall in the playoff picture. They lost Eifert recently. John Ross has done nothing this year. Andy Dalton's Andy Dalton. Not bad, but certainly not good. Um, Defense has been mediocre. There's just there. I actually think they might actually be a better team than I thought they were going to be coming into the season, since I only had them at 3 wins and they already have 2, and they play the Browns at least one more time. Oh, not at least, they do play the Browns one more time. Yeah, they're not a good team, and they're going nowhere. Number 25, another team that did not move, the New York Jets. So they again, this is kind of a high watermark for them compared to what people were expecting from the beginning of the year, like getting into the mid to low to mid 20s in any kind of power rankings. I don't think anybody was expecting that to happen. They came off that loss to the Pats, and now they are definitively in last place in the division. They have Atlanta next week, which you think should be a tough game, but given the way Atlanta's been playing, the fact that they are now 0 for 3 against the AFC East, there's no particular reason to think that they're gonna. There's no particular reason to think that they are gonna destroy the Jets. Still think it's still gotta have to assume that the Falcons will beat the Jets, but I don't think it's gonna be a blowout. Anyway, moving on. Number 24, the Baltimore Ravens. So you can tell the NFC North is pretty bad, since we've already talked about 3 of the 4 teams, and we're only up to number 24 in the power rankings. Ravens moved down 2 slots. They're below 500, even though they're in second place. They're way out of the playoffs. They already lost to the Steelers head-to-head and are a couple games behind them in the division. Kind of unlikely that they're going to make any kind of serious playoff run. Obviously, still early enough. A wild card spot could still be in play if they can really turn it around, but at this point, they don't look very good. Flacco's been pretty terrible, but the offense around him has been tough too, so I don't think you could put all of that on him, but he certainly isn't doing anything to rise to the occasion with the other issues that they have. Number 23, actually moving up 3 slots, is the Chicago Bears. They won, and they so they beat the Panthers. If you've been listening to these things, I don't actually think that highly of the Panthers. However, Panthers aren't a terrible team, and they obviously have a pretty good record, and I picked them to win that game. So, kudos to the Bears for coming through and, beating a team that has been playing pretty decent for the most part. I think it says a lot about their defense, because, frankly, they scored 17 points, but only 3 on offense. The other 2 were the fumble recovery for a touchdown and the pick 6 for a touchdown. So, I do think that the Bears defense is legit. It's not, I don't think it's a top 5 type unit where it could carry a really weak offense, but it's good enough that they will definitely be in games, and they could end up winning more games than a lot of people thought they would, just because they're going to keep it close enough that, the offense could fall into some points here or there and win a game. All right, moving on. Number 22, the Oakland Raiders, actually moving up 7 slots. So that was a big win over the Chiefs. If they had lost that game, their season pretty much would have been over. And they would have been back down at near the bottom of the list as they were last week. They're still not in a great position, but they're certainly in a better one now. The division still seems a little bit of a stretch for them to be able to get back, just because they're so far behind the Chiefs, but they do now own a tiebreaker, and they do have another game against them, so if they could actually win that one too, then that things are a little bit more interesting if that can happen. But this was supposed to be one of the better teams, so if they can turn it around and say go on a 4, 5, 6 game winning streak, or win 5 of 6 or something like that, then they're certainly not out of it. But they do need to do something kind of along those lines to have any kind of realistic expectation of making the playoffs. Hence, they are still pretty low. Number 21, the LA Chargers, moving up 7 slots as well. I've had to keep the Chargers ahead of Oakland. I felt at this point they have been a bit hotter than Oakland has. So we'll see if that holds up. I was not high on the Chargers coming into the year, but a lot of people were. So, similar to Oakland, if they can run off 4 of 5, 5 of 6, something like that, They could be sort of back into it, though they are, again, just like Oakland, if they don't do something like that soon, they are definitely have their backs against the wall. So we'll see what happens with that. But it was an impressive win over the Broncos. Again, I was not high on the Broncos coming in, similar to when I was talking about the Panthers. I kind of had to move them up just because they were winning games and looking fairly impressive in some of them. Um, but still shutting them out and getting 21 points on that defense. And I mean, not that that's like super high scoring, but like that's a defense that can easily hold you to half of that. Um, so the Chargers have definitely looked good recently. Let's see if they can keep it up. Number 20, the Green Bay Packers falling another 6 slots. So we were talking about we knew that there was going to be a drop off from Rodgers to Huntley. Nobody thought that wasn't going to be the case. It was just how steep. Based on what we saw so when he came in after Rodgers first got hurt and now this first start, it seems like it's a pretty steep drop off, and he does not look like a real NFL quarterback. Some of these backups might not look like studs, but they at least look serviceable. He needs to show a lot more to even get into that category. Defense played pretty well, and the running game did pretty well, so they were competitive and actually led for a good portion of the game last week, but there just wasn't enough to overcome the poor quarterback play in general, and the defense is just not good enough to be able to carry something like that. So they could move back up if he starts playing better, but at this point, kind of looks like it's a lost season for Green Bay. Number 19, the Jacksonville Jaguars moving up 1 slot. Mentioned before, I don't feel that highly of the Jags. They did win. They did win fairly convincingly, very convincingly. But they beat another bad team, and they're in a crappy division for the most part. They are in first place in that division, but that's not impressed with them. I do like their defense. I still think Bortles is just a disaster waiting to happen in any given game. If Fournette, I don't think the Fournette injury is supposed to be serious, but if it does manifest into something that does cause him to miss more than just 1 or 2 games throughout the rest of the season, that will certainly hurt their chances a lot, because then Bortles will have to do more, and the more he has to do, the more likely he will screw up. He had a pretty good game this week, but against a terrible defense. So, and they had a big lead, so there wasn't much pressure. So let's see what happens if he's playing a decent defense in a close game. My guess is that's when he'll have 3 turnovers again. All right, number 18, just ahead of the other AFC South team we just talked about, the Tennessee Titans, moving down 5 slots. They won, but they beat the Browns by 3 in overtime and couldn't score a touchdown. So that's barely better than losing in regards to your opinion of a team. Now, obviously they won, so that helps them in the standings, and that's kind of what you want to do. If you have a bad game, you still want to win. But they've had a lot of bad games and a lot of poor showings recently, so I am definitely not nearly as high on this team as I was coming into the season. They could still turn it around. They still are very much alive to make the playoffs, because they could very easily win this division because it's wide open. But they got to start playing better, or even if they can make the playoffs, they will be a first-round slaughter. Number 17, falling down 8 slots, the Atlanta Falcons. No shame losing to the Pats in Foxborough, but they didn't just lose. They were completely uncompetitive. The Pats were in their heads from the Super Bowl, clearly going for so many 4th downs early on. They couldn't get anything done on offense. They had a hard time stopping the Pats on defense. They even they had a field goal block. They missed another one, so they couldn't even get it done on special teams. It was just an all-around disaster, and now they've lost 3 in a row, all to AFC East teams. That's just kind of an interesting coincidence, but kind of shows you, people thought that the NFC South would be one of the best divisions coming into the year, and nobody thought much of the AFC East outside of the Pats, and yet now they've lost 3 in a row to those teams, and overall the division is killing that division in the year-to-date stuff. So the Falcons, they still have the potential on offense because they have most of the same guys back from last year. So they really just need to kind of get clicking, and then they might have a chance, because the defense is actually a little bit better up to this point than it was last year. So I don't like dropping them this far because I still think that they are a talented team, but at some point talent and results have to align, or it doesn't really matter. All right, number 16, moving up 3 slots, the Miami Dolphins. It's hard to believe they're 4-2 because they just haven't seemed to be all that good. But they are winning, and frankly, even though they lost Jay Cutler, I don't think Matt Moore is Matt Moore is actually a pretty decent backup to begin with, and Cutler certainly. It's not like they lost Aaron Rodgers. You could even say that it's not like they lost Ryan Tannehill again. So decent defense. Ajayi is a pretty good running back. Let's see what they do. Obviously, if Moore really shits the bed, then they'll be in trouble. Or if Cutler comes back and is even more cutlery than he has been up to this point, they might not go anywhere. But right now, at least, again, they haven't been winning pretty, but they've been winning. So if they can right the ship and look a little bit more like last year's team. Last year's team started off terrible and then played really well. So this team at least has a good record. If they can, like I said, if they can kind of turn it around, they could still make some stuff happen. I don't know if that's gonna happen, but kind of have a middle of the pack, which seems about right at this point. Number 15, the Denver Broncos, moving down 4 slots. So the smoke and mirrors that looked like the Broncos had a decent offense, in some of the earlier games this year is certainly gone away. Simeon hasn't been looking good. The running game hasn't been doing too much. The line, they have problems like everybody was expecting them to. The defense is still really good, but you still only have half the ball right there. This is in 2015. They're not scoring on defense a lot, which is one of the big reasons that they were so good that year. It's still one of the better defenses in the league, but if they're not actually putting up points on the board, they have one of the worst offenses, so they're not going that far. Again, they have a middle of the pack because if they can get enough done on certain situations, they might be able to pull it off, but a lot of times it's just not going to happen. All right, number 14, moving down 2 slots, the Carolina Panthers. As I've said over and over again, I don't really believe in the Panthers. I think they have some stuff going on D, though if Gleekly can't come back, then that's definitely going to be a big loss on the defensive side of the ball. Cam certainly has the potential to have a great game any given week, but he also has plenty of complete clunkers like he did this past week and several other weeks this year. I don't believe in this team. I don't think they're god awful. Like I don't think that they're going to fall in the bottom 5 or 6 teams in the league at any point, but they are. I would not be shocked if they finished last, and I don't expect them to make the playoffs, and I have them outside of the playoffs right now. Number 13, the Detroit Lions, moving up 3. They were on their bye, but I had to move some of the other teams down so they get to move up by just luck there. Again, they're in the NFC North, where the Bears are actually playing a bit better, but I still don't think that they're going to make a serious run. The Lions, I thought, were going to be decent coming into the year, and now that they have a clear shot at moving ahead of the Packers because of the Aaron Rodgers loss, they could certainly sneak in kind of like last year as the number 6 seed if they start playing really well and Minnesota stumbles at all. They still have a shot at the division. I don't think that's the most likely scenario, but they are definitely in the wild card mix and still have a legitimate shot at the division as well. Number 12, the Dallas Cowboys, moving them up 6 slots. Now, it was the 49ers who are winless, but they killed them. They beat them by 30 points. And this was a team that, in their previous 6 losses, the whole margin in all of those losses was significantly less than 30 points. They were competitive in pretty much all of those games, right until the very end. So, even though it was a winless team, they still made a statement by really running them out of the building. Also, now they're 3-3, and the division seems a little bit tough to imagine at this point, just because the Eagles got so far ahead. Though they do have both games against the Eagles still, so if they sweep, something could change up. But I do think they have a better shot than the Skins at this point, even though I do have the Skins a little bit higher, just because because right now I think they're both vying for a wild card spot. The Cowboys, the Cowboys, like I said, still have both games against the Eagles, so they could, if they play well enough going into those games, they could still be in the mix, but I don't think that's going to happen. But they're definitely in the mix for a wild card still. Speaking of the Skins, number 11, moving down one slot after their loss, is the Washington Redskins. They were pretty competitive most of that game, and they did have a lead at certain points. I do think the Eagles are one of the best teams in the league right now, so that was tough for them to do. But now they've also been swept by the Eagles. So actually, if you take the Eagles out of the picture, they're actually like only a one-loss team. They're actually quite good. Um, so they pretty much have no shot at the division because they're a couple games behind and they already got swept, so they have no chance. So they already way behind in the tiebreaker, no chance there. Um, I'm I'm surprised that their defense got slaughtered quite as badly against the Eagles because they had been playing mostly pretty good this year. They actually scored basically what I was expecting them to score. Just thought the defense would do a little bit better in that game. Um, they're definitely in the mix for the playoffs. I don't think they have any real shot at the division at this point, though. If they did, if they had won that game, it probably would have them a little bit higher. Number 10, the Buffalo Bills, moving up 7 slots. Kind of seemed crazy to move them up that much, but they are record-wise they're a good team. They have a very good defense. They have a good running game. Tyrod Taylor is underrated. He's not a top 5 type quarterback, but he might be a top 10. And he's got a good versatile skill set that works very well in the scheme that they run in Buffalo. In the end, I don't think that they are going to have a realistic shot of winning the division, but I thought they would be decent, like a 7, maybe 8 win team. Things might break well for them. Maybe they can get 10 wins and actually get a wild card spot. 9 might be enough for a wild card spot this year, in which case they'll be very competitive. I think. So, crack on the top 10. We'll see how long that can last. Number 9, the New Orleans Saints, moving up 6 slots. So they're 4-2. They're leading their division. They're on a 4-game winning streak. And looking pretty good on both sides of the ball, especially the defense. Who the hell could think you were going to say that about the Saints coming into the season after the last several seasons and after the first couple of games of this season, to be frank. But they have really turned it around and been playing well. Now, obviously some of these teams just don't have great offenses, but at the same time, they're still stopping them. If they were a really crappy defense, that's, you would expect that even bad offenses would be able to put up 2-3 touchdowns on them without struggling too much. So we'll see what it can do. Breeze actually isn't even having that great of a season for him. Very good stats, one of the better quarterbacks in the league, but not not in the MVP conversation at this point with his team playing well. He usually isn't in the MVP conversation. That's usually because his team stinks, not because he does. He doesn't stink. He has been not impressive by his lofty standards. I want to make that clear to any Saints fans listening. So let's see if they can keep it up. I like them a little bit. I don't have any team in this division right now, but I like them more. Certainly like them more than the Panthers. Certainly like them more than the Bucks right now. Still think the Falcons could turn some stuff around, but if they don't, then I don't see any reason why the Saints can't take this one home and win the division, get at least one home playoff game. Number 8, the Minnesota Vikings, falling down one slot. I probably could have kept them where they were, but they won. They won fairly convincingly, but I didn't think it was the prettiest win. I don't know why. I don't know. They're still in the driver's seat in that division. Could easily get a bye if they can play up to their potential. I don't think it's coming out of the South, so it's more between. I think the Eagles are probably cruising towards a bye, and then it'll be between whoever wins the North and whoever wins the West. I think is probably the most likely for the next one. Speaking of the West, number 7, the LA Rams, moving up one slot. So basically, I just flipped the Rams and the Vikings. I liked what the Rams showed me a little more this week than what the Vikings did. That's pretty much all this means. So I can pretty much leave it at that. Gurley's had another good game. Goff is still looking strong. Like I said, I have bought into them finally. Goff has had enough good games that I don't think it's just he pulled a couple of decent games out of his butt after being terrible. I think being terrible last year was just his learning curve, and now he's starting to play like a legit, real NFL above average to very good quarterback. Number 6, the Houston Texans, kind of highly ranked given they don't have a particularly amazing record, but I think they have all the pieces still to be able to make a run, and especially in a division where there isn't a particularly strong other team. Even though they are technically in third place, it's not technically they're in third place. They're a game behind in the win column in both Tennessee and Jacksonville, and they did already lose head-to-head to Jacksonville, so obviously that's an advantage for the Jags. But I just believe much more in this team than I do with those. Again, we'll see in a couple of weeks if the Jags keep winning, the Texans lose some games that I thought they should have won. This week they're playing Seattle, so I don't think that's going to tell you. Well, if they win, that will tell you something. If they don't win, I don't think that necessarily torpedoes anything that I think about them at this point. Speaking of Seattle, number 5, also staying in the same spot. I think I said that the Texans didn't move. That's where I am last week. Same thing with the Seahawks. Defense is really good. Losing Averill is a big deal. They signed Freeney. He's old, but he was good last year. He was really good in the Super Bowl. He might have some gas left in the tank. He certainly doesn't have to be, quote unquote, the man on that team. He is definitely just a cog that, if he can, he might not be able to play 80% of the snaps, but if he can play 10% of them pretty well, full force in the ones that he actually does, he could still be disruptive and could help that team a lot. I think that's a better fit than a team that actually needs a lot of defensive help. Better to be a cog on a team that has a good defense, and he doesn't have to be anything, be the guy carrying anything. Number 4, falling down 3 slots, the Kansas City Chiefs. 2 losses in a row. Now they lost a division game. No shame in losing to the Steelers, even though it was at home. The Raiders were supposed to be a good team, and it was in Oakland, so not the worst thing. And they certainly could have won that. Certainly could have won either of those 2 games. So definitely not going to have them plummet in the standings, but they definitely are showing some weakness that they weren't showing the first month or so of the season. Yeah, not much else to say there. So number 3, moving up 1 slot, the team that beat the Chiefs 2 weeks ago, the Pittsburgh Steelers. So technically they are ahead of the Chiefs now. They have the same record, and now they have the head-to-head tiebreaker. So had to move them ahead there because of the recent performance. Steelers had another good game against the Bengals, but it was the Bengals, so nothing to get super duper excited about. But they are definitely in the driver's seat in their division. I expect them to win that, and would be surprised if they're not at least the 3 seed again, and certainly should be in contention for a bye and possibly even first overall now that they own the tiebreaker over the Chiefs. And they also have a game against the other most likely team to be vying for the number 1 seed. Our number 2 team, the New England Patriots, moving up 1 slot. If it's so, over the last few weeks, they've been giving up a lot less points on defense, and now they also gave up far fewer yards, and were actually very dominating on the defensive side of the ball when you take out the garbage time stats that Ryan was able to put up at the end of the first half, when instead of taking a knee, just threw a bunch of passes, never got close to scoring, but was able to get something like 3 or 4 completions for around 40-ish yards. And then over 100 yards, going to, I think it was 8 for 8 or something like that at the end of the game, and got a touchdown at the very end when the Pats were up 23-0 with 4 minutes to go. So when you take out the garbage time, they absolutely destroyed what should be a very good Falcons offense. So if they've fixed the defense, it doesn't have to be quite that good every week, but if they basically are back to being a slightly above average defense, it doesn't have to be number 1, 2, 3 in the league kind of thing. But if they're in the top dozen or so defenses from here on out, they're going to be really good, and they ain't going to be losing very many games. And they're going to be a Super Bowl favorite going into the playoffs. And like I said, this is all about winning the Super Bowl, so I think that they are back to being one of the 3 teams that I think, 3 or 4 teams in the AFC that I think have legitimate shots. The 2 right behind them, and then the Texans. So that's where they are now. I almost put them at number 1 if and if the Monday night game had gone a different way, they would have been number one. But gonna move up one slot. The Eagles, best team in the league right now, record-wise. They're in the driver's seat for their division. They're in their driver's seat for home field advantage in the NFC playoffs. The biggest thing to win the Super Bowl is getting there, and I think they have the inside track on getting there right now. This is not last year's 3-1 Eagles team that fell apart. This team is far better. They still have the strong defense. They have a really good offense. Wentz has really gotten himself to being a top-tier quarterback in the league right now. So I think they're legit. They might not be as good as they are right now the rest of the season, but I don't see an NFC team that I like nearly as much as them at this point. They did lose Peters, the offensive lineman. That's going to be big. Hopefully they can find a reasonable replacement. If the protection starts really breaking down there and that affects Wentz a lot, then things could change quickly. But right now, they are the class of the NFC, and they are in a better position to win the NFC than I think the three teams from the AFC that I have right behind them are. So that's why they're number one. All right. Until next week, thanks for watching, and please like, comment, and share the videos, and subscribe to our channel. You can also follow us on other social media. Facebook and Twitter are both @MA Sports Central. Thanks, and we will see you soon.